This is one of the most famous sugyas in Shas, and it has all sorts of subtleties and implications. Not saying that I was mechadish anything here, but it's worthwhile to see them. And there's more on the same page, which it depends on how much time we have. But this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines up from the bottom. Talking about the fact that there are certain mitzvos which, when someone threatens you and says, I want you to do this, wants to violate the mitzvah, I want you to do this certain avera, and if you refuse to do what I say, I'll kill you, there are certain mitzvos that you have to die rather than violate. And one of them is murder. So the Gemara is in the middle of a much longer discussion, but here it asks, a third word in the beginning of the line, Rotzeach gufei, murder itself, as opposed to compare it with other things, just taking the case of murder itself, minolan. How do we know that rather than kill someone else, you have to allow yourself to be killed? So where it says svarahu, and we will come back and talk about what svara is, what svara means. But if you have any information about this or any intuitions about this, you might try to keep them in mind as we go through and see whether what we say fits your information or intuitions. It's a svara based on an actual case that took place. Either Rabbi or Rava, that fellow who came in front of Rabbi or Rava, Violate. So this fellow came to, let's say Rabbi, that's what's printed in our Gemara, came to Rabbi, and he said, I have a problem and I need a psak halacha. Amali Mori Dorai, the mayor, the ruler of my city, said to me, Zil katle la planya, go and kill so-and-so. Ve'ilo katlina loch, I will kill you. So A is saying to B, go and kill C. And if you don't go and kill C, I, A, will kill you. And if B says, listen, if you're prepared to commit murder, why don't you kill C directly? A says, shut up and do what I say. And here's my gun. So just do it. What should I do? Should I kill him and stay alive, or should I allow myself to be killed? Amalei, so Rabbi said to him, Likteluch v'lo tikto. You should be killed, and you should not kill the other person. Mi yemar, who could say, the damadidoch sumik tvei, that your blood is redder than his blood? Dilma damadahu gavra sumik tvei. Maybe his blood is redder than yours. Now, let's just meditate on the words as we have them. I'm going to read Rashi. Rashi is extraordinarily rich here. Should I kill him to stay alive, or should I allow myself to be killed? Well, it depends upon whose blood is redder. Whose blood is redder? Whose life is more valuable, more precious? And the problem is, who knows? Who could say that your blood is redder than his, that your life is more valuable than his? Maybe his life is more valuable than yours. Of course, in saying those words, what you're assuming is there is such a thing as a value of a life. And lives don't have equal value. And if indeed your life did have more value than the other guy, then you should kill him. Gee, that doesn't sound like the way we would analyze it today. How can you commit murder to save your life? I mean, murder is a terrible crime. How can you do that? The words here are describing a perspective which is very foreign to the way in which we would analyze this problem. And it's only ignorance. It's only ignorance. If someone would fill in, like the Gemara Makos, according to the Rabbi Lager, if someone would fill in for the Mishnah Makos that maybe some lives are more valuable than other lives, then maybe we should kill the other guy in order to stay alive. That's what it says so far. And then, if in fact lives have values, and they don't all have equal value, why is it that we can't figure it out? The Gemara says that's for sure. No, we're not going to be able to figure it out. And then, if we can't figure it out, so let's see. Maybe it's him, maybe it's me, and so forth and so on. Why then is it obvious that I should die? Maybe I should flip a coin. Because maybe it's right for me to kill him and stay alive. Maybe it's right. So why is the uniform decision, no, don't kill him? Should be a 50-50. Why shouldn't you flip a coin? Yeah.
Does the Rabbi have any Havana in the double lashon of the Gemara? Meaning, once you say maybe X is greater than Y, don't I know the other side is maybe Y is greater than X? Like, why did the Gemara feel the need to explain both tzadim of an obvious?
Yeah. Tosfos will have a good answer for that. Tosfos will have a good answer for that. Man, we'll get to Tosfos because of Karka Olam. Because there are, well, maybe I should say it out. There are cases where you would apply exactly the same logic, and you would live, and the other person will die. These words, you don't know whose life is worth more, is not a uniform instruction that you should always die to save the other guy. On the contrary. For example, says Tosfos, suppose the man with the gun says, just don't move. We're going to pick you up and drop you on the baby, and the baby's going to die. Just don't move. So now, says Tosfos, you should use the same logic backwards. Who says his blood is better than mine? Why should I do anything to determine the outcome? In that case, says Tosfos, you should be passive, let them pick you up and drop you on the baby should die, because you have no motivation for doing anything, because you don't know which is best. So in both cases, says Tosfos, you should be passive, and there it works out that the outcome of who dies is the opposite. So the fact that the Gemara goes backwards is a good smach for the way Tosfos looks at it, I think. Okay, so now let's read Rashi. And let's think about the Rashi as we read it, because Rashi here is really Svarahu. This is like 10 lines up before it gets big. It's Svara, whatever Svara is. Shelo tidche nefesh chaveiro. You shouldn't push aside the life of your friend. The other guy, C. You shouldn't push his life aside. I'll tell you why, says Rashi. Because the difference between pushing his life aside on the one hand and you're dying on the other hand, if you analyze it logically, you can see that pushing his life aside is the worst option. Of course, we have to have in the back of our minds, it's the worst option, but that's because I don't know whose life is worth more. Because if I knew whose life was worth more, then it wouldn't be the worst option. We figured that out from the Gemara already. So whatever option, whatever distinction Rashi is going to make and say pushing his life aside is worse, that's only because I don't know whose life is worth more. If I knew whose life was worth more, then I would do it the other way. So Rashi's explanation can't be too outside the box that would say always the other guy, you should die and not the other guy. If it's so absolute, then it's going to conflict with what the Gemara implies. Right? So see how Rashi does it inside the box. You shouldn't push aside the life of your friend. Dikatarti, because there two bad things happen. As against when you die, only one bad thing happens. What are the two? Ibud neshama. Number one, a Jew dies. That's bad. That a Jew should die is bad. It's a bad thing. Ve'avera. And also, you killed him. You committed the avera of murder. So to kill him means two bad things happen. The avera and the loss of a Jewish life. Mipnei nafsho, in order to save his own life, deleke elachada, because in terms of your dying, only one bad thing happens. The one bad thing that happens is that a Jew dies. Ibud neshama. V'lo yaver. So, B killing C results, the world has gotten a kilkul. The world has got a compound kilkul, a double kilkul. A Jewish sham is lost and an avera is done. B, allowing himself to be killed, has a single kilkul. A Jewish neshama is lost, but no avera is done. Rashi says, Mordorah, as we're going to see, is a goy. Why he says that exactly, I'm not sure. Maybe the avera of the goy doesn't count as much as a Jewish avera or something. But he does say that it's a goy.
At least because it would be equal if it was a Jew.
It could be, but he wants to come out this way. Now watch. So far now, I already now know that B killing C is a worse option than B allowing himself to be killed, because B killing C has a double kilkul and B dying has a single kilkul. Now Rashi explains more. Now you say, but don't we have a general rule of pikuach nefesh? Don't you do whatever is necessary to do to save a life? Well, B will say, my life is on the line, excuse me. What about pikuach nefesh? What about saving my life? I violate Shabbos to save my life. I can steal to save my life. I can break down your door to save my life. What about my life? Zuk Rashi, analyze it with logic and you'll see you're making a mistake. When the Kodesh Baruch Hu said, Lav ol mitzvahs mishum v'chai behem, to violate other commandments in order to fulfill the injunction, you should live through them, mishum de yikara be'einav neshama shel Yisrael. The reason the Kodesh Baruch Hu said you should violate other commandments in order to save a Jewish life is because the Jewish life is precious to God. That's why. God doesn't want to lose Jewish lives. But here, Jewish life cancels out, because either way a Jewish life is lost. So the whole svara of the Chai Behem, according to Rashi, doesn't apply here. It doesn't distinguish between the two alternatives. It's not that you should protect your life because your life, rather than violate a commandment. That has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Kodesh Baruch Hu is looking at his world, and he's looking at losses to his world. We say to B, whether you kill him or you die, from a Kodesh Baruch Hu's point of view, it's an equal loss. You hear the answer to that question I asked at the beginning? I just put in a word now that's not quite fully justified. Right? Okay, if you haven't got it, you'll see us come around the corner. Right? It's an equal loss, right? Is it an equal loss? How do you know it's an equal loss? What would make the loss equal or unequal? Wouldn't it depend upon whose blood is redder? Isn't that what we said at the beginning? Does it have to be equal? We just don't know whose is bigger. We don't know who's bigger. So we can't make a judgment on that basis. We see how Rashi built it in? He built it in here. As I told you, he can't have a solution that's around the corner, outside the box, which will overpower the deduction for the Gemara. He's building it in here. He's saying the reason why V'chai Behem doesn't apply is because either way, a Jewish neshama is lost, and from the point of view of our information, that's all we know. We can't say which is more precious. Yikar be'einav neshama shel Yisrael, v'ocha kabi rotzeach, kiva de sof, iga neshama. Either way, there's going to be a Jewish soul lost. Lama yehei mutar lavor. What then gives you the right to violate the commandment of lo sitzach? Don't commit murder. The only thing that gives you, and this is another thing, Rashi's general shita, I'll come back to this, but the only thing that gives you the right to violate lo sitzach is the fact that you save a Jewish life. The chai behem is what trumps lo sitzach. The chai behem is to save a Jewish life. This way, by killing C, you're not saving a Jewish life. Because he's dead, and by allowing yourself to die, you're dead. Either way, a Jewish life is lost. So the Chai Behem plays absolutely no role here. In no way do you have an option which will save a Jewish life, a net savings of Jewish life. Your life versus his life, you have no way to compare those. This is the blood. Who says that his soul is dearer to its creator than C's soul? Hilkach dvar hamakom lo nitan litchos. Therefore, the command, the word of the creator can't be pushed aside. There's something that Rashi's saying here, which is not quite on the surface, but it is. But if you figure it out in logic, it's there. Let me ask you a question. Just let's talk logic now. Straightforward logic, the Torah logic, right? The guy puts a gun to your head. He says, "Eat a piece of nevela," or don't say Kriya Shema. Don't put on tefillin. According to Rashi, what should you do? Well, let's say there were no v'chai behem. Erase v'chai behem from the Torah. Those are things pikuach nefesh. The guy says, eat nevela. The guy says, don't say Kriya Shema. The guy says, don't put on tefillin. What should you do? Die. Lo nitan da dvar hamokom lidchos. The command of the king is not given to push aside. Sorry. The Creator said, do it, you do it, period. Life, who says life is counts? Because Baruch Hu said to do it, period. The only heter you have not to do the mitzvah is that you might die. And that's a pasuk. The pasuk says, v'chai behem. So every time you want to have a heter to do the avera, it's v'chai behem. According to Rashi, oh my gosh, I'm nuts.
Rabbi starts with the words according to Rashi.
Yeah, I didn't forget.
I will attempt to cut this middle out of the shir.
Oh, this part. Okay, from my side, you can leave it in. I don't care. I spilled the water. What difference does it make? Thank you very much. Fine.
Oops. Not the most absorbent.
Yeah.
But you can bet they were expensive.
Yeah.
Terrific. Fine. Thank you very much. So, according to Rashi, according to Rashi, the picture's like this. Kodesh Baruch Hu said to do it, you have to do it. Costs play no role whatsoever in the calculation. Now, Kodesh Baruch Hu then said, v'chai behem, because of v'chai behem, comes along a mitzvah, it might cost my life, I violate the mitzvah. Right? Then there are cases where Kodesh Baruch Hu took off the v'chai behem, and since he took off the v'chai behem, they go back to the original position of you can't push away at God's word. You cannot do what violate God's word at any cost whatsoever. This is what happens with the three categories, according to Rashi: murder, and arayos, and avodah zarah. That the v'chai behem is taken off, and you go back to the original position. Tosfos has the opposite position. If you learn the Tosfos here, and other places, Tosfos has the opposite position. I'm at base here. So, but that's Rashi's position. So Ritzicha, from this point of view, is no different from eating nevela or not putting on tefillin. It's just God said to do X and you're not doing X. Too bad. So what's your heter going to be? V'chai behem. V'chai behem is based on the preciousness of a Jewish neshama. This way, the cost of a Jewish neshama is equal in both cases. So then, the mitzvah now reasserts itself. You want to commit murder? Why? Who told you to commit murder? The only possible permission to commit murder would be v'chai behem. V'chai behem means you saved the Jewish neshama, and you're not saving a Jewish neshama. So either way, so therefore, that's why you. Now, let's put in what we said before. So, but if I knew whose blood was redder, if I knew whose life is more valuable, then I would. If B knew that his life is more valuable than that of C, he would kill C. Why? Because then v'chai behem comes back in. Turns out, according to Rashi, that v'chai behem is not neshama versus no neshama. It's also better neshama versus worse neshama. The precious yakara he nafsho Yisrael. Well, one nefesh is more yakar than the other nefesh. If one nefesh is more yakar than the other nefesh, then dvar habokom nitam litchos. Yes, you can push aside what Kodesh Baruch Hu said, and you can kill him, because v'chai behem tells you should preserve the precious Jewish soul, and there's a more precious Jewish soul. Yeah.
He was learning that Chai Behem is a din of Putra. Rashi starts at the beginning
Yeah.
with, on one hand, you have Ibud Neshama plus Avera. On the other hand, you just have the loss of Neshama. So that's where in this.
Yeah.
The way the structure I'm understanding comes out is that
So no, I would just see that I put it that way because that's how we started out. But the explanation now is not 2 against 1. It's that the fact that it's an ibud neshama on let's put it this way, you have a mitzvah lo sirtzach, right? The only heter you have to violate lo sirtzach is to save a neshama, and here by doing the lo sirtzach, you're not saving a neshama. So then lo sirtzach no nitan l'tchos. It's not 2 against 1. It's that the neshama trumps the mitzvah, and when the neshama cancels out, the mitzvah reasserts itself, and the mitzvah cannot be violated.
right. The way I'm understanding is that when I say Chai Behem, I don't have the Avera because it's Hutra instead of Duchui. It's not pushed off. It's not there. So therefore, if I knew which nefesh weighed out more than the other, let's say I knew, so then Chai Behem comes back according to the binyan we had, and if Chai Behem comes back, so then the Isser is gone, and so it's 1 against 0, not 2 against 1.
Yeah, but as I said, the 2 against 1 was only reading Rashi before you get to this explanation, and I imagine that it would be Hutter.
Right, but I'm saying, so I'm just connecting the beginning of Rashi to the
Yeah.
I think it builds in that structure.
The 2 against 1 is this: there were 2 independent factors, and 2 is more than 1. Here, it's that the one factor undoes the other one.
So that there's not actually the Avera we thought there was before.
Yeah, that's right. So it becomes 0,
Right.
and now when that cancels out, then it becomes 1 against 0.
Right.
Okay, there's never a 2. There's no 2 left. Okay, now Rashi explains more. Moridarai Adon Iro v'Nochri Hava. I've asked a lot of people about that. Why it should be Nochri? I haven't gotten an answer. Now he explains in more detail. My chaz damedak sumuk tvei. Who's what do you see that led you to think that your blood is redder than his blood? Mi yodea shehei damcha chaviv v'na'el liyotzrecha. That your blood will be chaviv, beloved, and pleasant to your Creator. Yosef midam chavercha. Hilchach ein kan lomar v'chai behem v'shloshi yomas behem. The phrase that it is the heter for violating a Avera to save life, should live with them, and then we infer you shouldn't die through them, is not appropriate to say here. Shlo hiter kosov elo mishum chavivus nafsham shel Yisrael la'Kadosh Baruch Hu. The only heter you have for violating Avera is the preciousness of the Jewish soul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The kan sheyesh ibud nefesh chavero, since it means the same thing with much greater length. Rashi said, but it's the same thing. That if you kill him to save your life, there's a loss of a Jewish soul either way. Lo nitan var hamelach litchos shetziva ala retzicha, that he commanded that you shouldn't commit murder. And as I say, these words could have been written about tziva al nevela or tziva al tefillin, will make absolutely no difference. There's no heter to violate any Jewish mitzvah without the heter of v'chai behem, which means to prevent the loss, absolute loss or net loss of a Jewish soul. There are exceptions to that also. But anyway, that's what he says. Now, the Gemara started off with the word svara. When I was an undergraduate, I took Jewish courses in university, and I was taught a lot of wrong things, some of them quite silly. And one of the wrong things I was taught is that svara means human logic. And there's a refrain that you find several times in the Gemara. When the Gemara is trying to learn a din from a pasuk, the Gemara will object, svara hi lama likra. Because it's svara, what do I need a pasuk for? Man, them's fighting words. That's really very dramatic. The Gemara is saying, if it's a svara, a pasuk doesn't add anything. Because it says svara hi lama likra. What do I need a pasuk for? It's svara. Which means that if you have svara, adding in a pasuk gets you no net gain. Because if there's some net gain, something extra you got from the pasuk, then you couldn't ask lama likra. The pasuk is there in order to give you that net gain. So it's got to be mamash equal. And of course, the professors at the university told me svara is the Gemara's word for human logic. And you see that human logic is equal to revelation. Revelation is no better than human logic. And you can trust your logic as if it was God talking to you, and on and on and on. As you can imagine, the drivel goes on and on and on. What's wrong with it? Why isn't svara that? Why isn't svara human logic? Now, there is a 2-volume sefer, I guess, called Mishpat Ivri by Menachem Alon, who was one of the Supreme Court justices in the Israeli Supreme Court. He was a Shomer Mitzvos. I don't read Hebrew very well, so I didn't read the whole thing, but I read some pages in it, and he said 2 things which I thought were extremely important. And one of them was, the concept of svara is what we would today call das Torah. It's what Torah understanding teaches you. And there are at least 2 different ways in which the Torah could teach you something. Is that I think that we have to accept A. So he says, why? Why should you accept A? There's a mission over here, there's a pasuk over there, a Tosefta over there, a Brisa. There's a Rav and Abai, and Rav says A and B, Abai disagrees, and we pasuk like Rav. There are sources. There are sources that I have that give me A. That's one possibility. The other possibility is, from my sum total of Torah understanding, I understand that A is correct. This particular Gemara, that particular pasuk, it's much broader than that. It's having a hashkafa that encompasses the Torah as a whole and sees the dynamics of the Torah, what's more important, what's less important, and enables you to make Torah judgments. That's svara. You could call it a drasha on Torah called a kula, rather than a drasha on a pasuk or a drasha on a mishnah, whatever. Let's take this as an example. Can B kill C to save his life, or can't he kill B to save his life? Well, it all depends on whose blood is redder. Now, Rashi tells us, no one could tell whose blood is redder by analyzing whose soul is dearer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let me ask you, Lahavdil Elef Havdalos Bein Tar V'Tamei. If we asked Aristotle this question, would he answer it this way? I think Aristotle would say, whose soul is more precious? Be realistic. A is 25 years old and B is 75 years old. A is very smart and B and C. B is 25 and C is 75. B is smart and C is dumb. B is learned and C is ignorant. B is sophisticated and C is simple-minded. B is morally good and C is morally evil. You can't tell whose life is a better life? That's not so hard. Certainly there are cases where you can tell that. And then B should kill C, according to your criterion. Why don't we agree with that? Because we say we don't know whose life is dearer to its creator. The creator, number one, has vastly more information than we do, including the pnimius of people, their inner lives, their thoughts, their hopes, their challenges, their inspirations, their struggles. And number two, there may be desiderata that we're not aware of. We're not aware that certain types of behavior or certain types of feeling or certain types of strength are valuable or more valuable than we can evaluate them, than we would take it to be that way. We have a concept of mida keneged mida. Gemara says, if a person can endure insult and not respond in kind and accept it without angry response, Kadosh Baruch Hu will forgive his sins. Really? Really? He insulted me, and I took it well, and I didn't respond. So I can forget about the cheeseburger I ate? Really? Why is that? Does it count for 2 cheeseburgers or only 1 cheeseburger? Like, what's going on? You know, the normal attitude is You didn't respond, you get credit for that. You ate the cheeseburger, you'll be paid for that. I mean, what's one thing got to do with the other? No, because I responded to him in a right way, I won't be punished for the cheeseburger. You would never dream of that. I would never dream of that. The Masorah hadn't given that to us. We would never dream of that. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes all sorts of things into account that we can't even imagine. Aristotle can't understand that. He hasn't got a creator. Doesn't believe in a creator. He doesn't believe in an intelligence that evaluates what you do. He thinks that what happens to people is chance. Just like what happens to cows and blades of grass, what happens to people is chance. He wouldn't agree with this logic. This isn't detached human logic. This is someone who knows Kol Torah Kula and applies it to this case. He can see that we're not able to make this calculation, we don't have this information, and we can't draw this conclusion. So Svara is not a glorification of abstract human logic. Svara, and now you understand when the Gemara says Svara Lama Likra, it's very natural now. Why are you using this pasuk as a piece of Torah to teach you this law when the rest of the corpus of Torah already teaches you this law? You don't need that specific pasuk because the rest of Torah teaches it to you. Someone who understands the rest of Torah already knows that it's true. He doesn't need this specific Torah to teach it. It means the body of Torah is redundant. That's why you don't need the pasuk. That's the challenge. It's an internal challenge, not a challenge from the outside. That's an extremely important implication of the Gemara here. And as I said, this is certainly not the way we would analyze. We would think it's a matter of principle, and murder is a terrible crime, and of course you can't justify it and so on. We're not saying that at all. Yeah.
So if a Navi had a revelation that B is greater than C, not Harashah and not Din Sivui, he would be able to make this calculation.
I think that's right. I'll tell you, Rabbi Eger asked a question. The Mishnah Makos talks about saving people's lives. And there it does have an order. Who you save rather than who. A Kohen rather than Israel, etc., etc. So Rabbi Eger says, why can't you use that Mishnah, which tells you if two people are drowning, it tells you which one to save. Isn't that telling you whose life is more precious? And if so, if A tells B, who's a Kohen, to kill C, who's a non-Kohen, why shouldn't B say, the Mishnah in Makos says that my life is more valuable, and therefore I can kill you? I don't know what teretz for Rabbi Leila's kasha. I heard the kasha, I haven't heard a teretz for it. I'm not saying there isn't a teretz. I'm not that well versed, but it's a good kasha. She shows you how seriously you should take what Rashi says. Right? Now, other Rishonim don't learn like Rashi, so I'm just explaining to you what Rashi said. Are we together so far? Okay, and a little bit higher up in the Gemara.
Maybe just a thought.
Yeah.
Here, I have a choice of do nothing. There, if I do nothing, two people die. That's for sure worse. So perhaps the Mishnah in Makos is giving me a hachra of, if nothing else, you might as well use this. But
Okay, see, it's very interesting. I mentioned this before, but maybe we should explore it just a little bit more before I go to the other part of the Gemara. Tosfos' attitude is that Karka Olam frees you from the obligation to give up your life. Passivity doesn't cancel the Ma'aseh Avera. Ma'aseh Avera it is. But it frees you from the obligation to give up your life. This is a gigantic nafkamina. Suppose they don't threaten you to kill you. They just threaten you to burn down your house. Then you have to resist and lose your house. It's not, if you thought that passivity canceled the Ma'aseh Avera, if you thought that Ma'aseh Avera is something that you do b'kum v'aseh, you have to do it actively. But just being quiescent would avoid the Avera, then you don't have to lose your house either. But no, it's not true. It just frees you from the punishment, but the Ma'aseh Avera it is. Lying still is a Ma'aseh Avera. Don't be fooled by the word Ma'aseh. So now, there is this preference for passivity. Now, I've asked people this question, whether the idea of passivity is a piece of logic, normal logic or general Torah logic, or whether it's a Masorah. Is there any reason to prefer passivity over activity? Meaning, I have a choice between two actions, A and B. A is active, B is passive. I don't know the outcomes. And let's say I know the probability is 50-50. That one will kill somebody, the other one won't kill somebody. I don't know which is which. Right? Or one will save someone's life, the other won't save someone's life, so I'm not involved in killing anybody. And I don't know which is which. And then the rule would be, sit still. Sit still. Which, if this is a general intuition, would mean if you get up and move, you're bad. You're a criminal. Done something evil, done something wrong. Frankly, intuitively, I can't hear it. What, I expended energy? That makes me bad? It's 50-50. Either way, someone will die or won't die. And nobody knows which is which. So why would motion be a terrible crime, and sitting still would be okay? I cannot for the life of me figure out a general moral idea of why passivity is better. My Rebbe suggested that thing you do actively is something that you invest more in. It has a bigger effect on the development of your character and so forth and so on. Those are indirect effects. Okay, fine. Imagine it's the last action of my whole life, right? I'm trying to get to it's an action whether you can see in some way that this is criminal. Or is this a Masorah? It's just part of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught us. So here's an example. What's worse? Lo sirtzach or lo samad al dam re'echa? Murder or sitting passively and allowing someone to die? What's the worse Aveira? So, according to the Masorah, according to actually the Psukim, right? Lo sirtzach is much worse. For lo sirtzach, a person can be executed. Cannot be executed for lo samad al re'echa. So, an Aveira performed passively seems to be less serious than an Aveira performed actively. Okay, those are Psukim. Kodesh Baruch Hu told me, that's the rule. But only because he told me. Without him telling me, I would never have dreamt such a thing. So, Taisus, who wants to work into the sugi here, says that when you have this situation where it's either, I can put myself into either I die or he dies, and of course I don't know whose life is more precious, don't do anything to decide the outcome. Because you can't justify an action. Passivity doesn't need the kind of justification that activity does. When you do something, you could be asked, why did you do it? And you should have a positive reason for doing it. When you sit still and don't do, and you ask, why did you sit still? An acceptable answer is, I didn't know what to do. Whereas, you do something, it's not an acceptable answer to say, I didn't know what to do. That's not acceptable. But again, I don't hear any general logic in that. I just hear that that's what the Masorah is telling me. So now, Tosfos invents a case, as I mentioned before, where passivity ends up in the other guy dying. And activity means I'll die. And Tosfos says, use the same logic. You don't know whose life is more precious, and one side of that is your life might be more precious. Don't do anything to determine the outcome, and let the other one die. Rather than resisting and you dying. But that's based on the idea that passivity is morally superior to activity. I would love to have an explanation of why that is, but
I don't know if to say a middle ground, it doesn't have to be that it's objectively morally superior or inferior, but from the actor's perspective, he gets credit, demotion for a vice vera on his account as compared to the world it happened.
He gets, you mean demerit for, right. But why would that be? Why would an active Maaseh be more, get more than a passive Maaseh?
Well, once we say that someone's going to die anyway, the passive Maaseh, there is going to be a Maaseh in the world.
No.
They meet.
No. You mean, but that's, I think, what Rashi says is a goy. The one who's right. He doesn't count. His Averas don't count. He's not brought into this discussion at all. Actually, we're leaving him out. Hooray! You know what the preferred outcome here is? Kill the mayor! Quick! You don't sit around and worry about killing the other Jew and what I should do. Shoot him. Right? We're not doing that. We're not going that far. We're trying to analyze just this aspect of the Yerek V'Yavor in murder. That's what's up for discussion.
It would be an interesting seer to the case, right? Why are we not discussing? Let's propose the logic, the obvious answer. Why are we not dealing with kill the mayor? The mayor's guards are going to kill you. I still think the answer is kill the mayor.
Oh, sure, but what's that got to do with it? I mean, the question, no, was only the way the Gemara sets it up. There are only two choices: B should kill C, or B should allow himself to be killed. And the question is, which is preferable of those two choices? Right? To add in other factors gives another choice, just doesn't face the problem the Gemara wants to face. That's what I think. So therefore, Tosha says, if the guy aims a gun at you and he says, "Just sit still. I'm going to pick you up and drop you on the baby," you should sit still and be dropped on the baby and kill the baby. Because you're not killing the baby, you're just a club in the hands of the guy. And that being the case, you can't do anything to determine. And it's not an option. Tosha doesn't allow you to volunteer to die. The Rambam does, but I'm sorry, the Rambam doesn't. Tosha does. But here, if your soul is worth more, you have no right to die for the other one, because it's all based on the fact that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the preciousness of the soul is what he's telling us we should preserve. So if I have the more precious soul, then I'm the one who has to stay alive, even if it costs me to kill the other one, because it's not a murder, it's not a bear anymore. If a Chaybehem tells you that's what you have to do. Yeah. So now I can just start this. It's a fascinating sugya. The other two mitzvahs are Giluy Arayos and Avodah Zarah. So here the Gemara wants to connect Giluy Arayos and murder. That's how it gets into murder. Okay, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 lines up from the bottom. Fourth word in a line. Giluy Arayos to Shfichus Damim. The Gemara has already taken care of Avodah Zarah. Those two. Kid Rabbi. The way Rabbi analyzed it. Tisanya. Rabbi Omer. Now here's the famous pasuk. Ki ka'asher yokum ish al re'ehu urtzacho nefesh kein hadavar hazeh. Here you're talking about Nara Marasa, who's being raped. Just like murder, where one person gets up against his neighbor, his friend, and kills him, so is this thing of rape. Now the Gemara says, "V'chimad lamadnu merotzeach me'ata." What are we learning? It says, rape is just like, rape of a married woman, rape is just like murder. Really? What are we learning? What do we know about murder that we're applying to rape? So people will tell you, well, you see, in murder there's a victim, and the victim is blameless. So too, in rape, you have to understand that the woman is blameless and nothing should be done to her. That's wrong. That's wrong. It's wrong because it's already written in the pasuk of rape. V'lanara lo sa'aseh davar. That's already written there. I have to learn that for murder. So if you thought that's what you're learning, it's wrong. So the Gemara's first thought is, well, something's backwards here. It says rape is like murder, and you look and say, okay, so let's look at murder and see what I have to learn. The most natural thing you think of learning is already written here. So then we're making a mistake. That's what the Gemara says. It took me 17 times reading Rashi to get this. Another person would get it right first time. But how is it? You want to compare the two of them? Start by comparing in the opposite direction. That's not what the pasuk says. The pasuk says that rape is just like murder. No, don't do that. Don't do that. I told you why, because it teaches you something you already know. It's already written there. Do it the other way. Say that murder is like rape. Go from rape to murder. Makish rotzeh l'na'am rosa. Ma na'am rosa nitan lahatzilo benafsho, or lahatzilo benafsho, two different girsos. Just as you can stop rape by killing. Now, your Gemara, our Gemara that's written here is by killing the rapist as he's chasing the woman and wants to kill her and wants to rape her, because as it says in a case of forbidden intercourse, you don't do anything to her. She cried out and there was no one to save her. So the Gemara says, aha, but if she could cry out, if she did cry out, somebody did hear her, then he should save her. That's what the pasuk is telling you. And save her anyway, in terms of killing the rapist also. Right? Now, that's written by Nara Marosa, by rape. That is, you can stop the rape of a married woman by killing the rapist before it happens, right? So then, afrotzeach nam nitan latzil benavsho. You can stop murder by killing the person chasing the victim to stop the murder. Now that you've learned from Nara Marosa to Rotzeach, you can now learn backwards. Umakish Nara Marosa l'Rotzeach, Marotzeach Regla Yavor, Av Nara Marosa Terev al Tavor. It says here, she should die rather than participate in forbidden sexual relations. So, what you have to figure out is that you started off by saying, I can't go from murder to rape because what it means to teach is something that's written in the pasuk. So go from rape to murder. Okay. What do I carry over from rape to murder? Die rather than transgress. You're speaking to the person himself or herself. You're telling them, don't transgress. Rather, you should die rather than transgress. And now that I've learned that way, which is backwards from the pasuk, come back. Because after all, the pasuk does say that rape is like murder. You can't avoid that. You've got to explain that in the pasuk. But now I can take another aspect, and that is...
that one's die rather than violate. The first one was kill rather than be killed.
I'm saying it's saved by killing the potential criminal. That's right. And now you can come back from murder and say die rather than transgress, and that's what you learn back. So now, let's see. So the first one here was you can stop it by killing. Right. So it means that this crime that's how it works. This crime is so terrible that killing someone is appropriate to stop the crime. So you see that this crime takes precedence over the preciousness of a life. Because we said the only thing, according to Rashi, the only thing that justifies committing a crime is that a life is saved. That's when you're faced with a choice. But here, the Torah itself tells you, the pasuk tells you explicitly, that this crime, this specific crime of rape, can be stopped by killing someone. So here you're destroying a soul in order to prevent the crime. And then you have the Hekesh, which tells you, just like this one can be so. So here, now of course, in the case of Nara Marosa, you're not stopping the crime by killing the rapist, that's already in the pasuk. But here you're telling the victim that if the gun is to your head and it's a question of dying or committing the crime, you have to die, because it's the same thing. It's a question of death. In this particular case, death taking precedence over that. So I think you can hear that the original thing was to learn from murder to rape, and we say it's redundant. What you're going to learn is already in the pasuk of rape, so it's not, there's nothing to do. Now, when you learn from rape to murder, from rape to murder, then you put something into the murder case that you didn't have before. Now you have better kill someone than have the crime occur. That you can take back, because that isn't written in the pasuk of rape. It isn't written in the pasuk of rape. And take it back over and say that she should die rather than commit the avera. Comes out, I must have learned this in the last 50 years, 30 times, 40 times, 50 times. Only recently did it get clear to me what's going on here. And of course, the words in the Gemara are gold, and they mean exactly what they say they mean. You just don't pay enough attention. But the basic idea in structural terms is, you're given an announcement, learn from A to B, and you say, what was I supposed to learn? This, B already says it. Okay, don't do that. Learn from B to A. And for B to A, you learn that A has a quality Q that you didn't know about. Now that B has that A has the quality Q that I didn't know about, I can learn from A to B a kind of Q quality which isn't in B. That's what makes the hekesh from murder to rape possible, because you learn something new about murder, and then you can transfer it back to rape, and you get a chiddush by rape. So the Gemara is extremely well crafted. Every piece is necessary. Anyway.
I transfer Q plus Z, Z being a rule I already had by A.
No, it isn't the same, because you see, let's see, the general subject here is we tolerate death to avoid crime. That's the general subject. But there are two kinds of death. One kind of death is kill the perpetrator before he commits the crime. And the other is someone threatened with death. If he doesn't commit the crime, should commit the crime rather than so here you learn, one second. Right, no, she should die rather than commit the crime. That's right. She should die rather than commit the crime. So there are two different types of sacrificing life for crime, right? To avoid crime. One is where you kill the perpetrator, and the other is where you tell the person you have to die rather than commit the crime. Right? Those are two different. So when you come back to Nar Marasa, that's what you're learning. That's not in the pasuk. It's a beautiful. How long it takes to get to a point in Chazal when you think that you understand something, and there may be still mistakes, but anyway, it's worth it. Okay.